let's talk presidential campaign fundraising to start, if we could. You happy with the results?
Yeah, we're very excited about how the campaign is going. Not only fundraising, but actually how well we're doing against Hillary Clinton. We actually lead Hillary Clinton in 5 states that were won by President Obama. And the way we're going to win in the fall is you have to be able to win the purple states. And we're doing very well with independent voters. We actually lead Hillary Clinton by 8 to 10 points with independents. And we actually lead her in Pennsylvania, where no Republican has won since 1988.
Let's talk about the Iran nuke deal, at least what we know about it at this point. Your thoughts on what Obama has agreed to?
You know, I've had a great deal of skepticism over, whether or not the Iranians are credible partners in this and can be trusted basically to adhere to an agreement. Their history, with international agreements has been one of prevarication and as well as somewhat craftily trying to get around the rules for the most part. And so I've always said if we're going to have an agreement, and I do think an agreement is preferable to war, but if we're going to have an agreement, that really we got to be very careful about not getting rid of all the sanctions in too big a hurry. And I think if there were to be an agreement that might have been one that I could support, it would have been an agreement that had sort of a gradual or stepwise reduction in sanctions over a several-year period. The problem I have with this agreement is there's going to be a significant release of sanctions really at the beginning of the test of compliance, not after we've seen consistent compliance.
And Senator Rand Paul, what do you foresee, not what it should be, but what will be the role of the United States Senate as this deal moves forward? To what extent will the Senate have input on this?
I was a supporter of the Corker bill for a couple of reasons and actually helped in the initial stages, because I think that this agreement should be approved by Congress. I also thought by passing the Corker bill in advance of this agreement, it should have given the president more leverage to say, look, I can't negotiate a weak deal or a bad deal, or it won't pass Congress. So there's a lot of reasons why it was a good idea for Congress to weigh in. The president was opposed to the Corker bill until he finally was for it when he saw that he was going to lose. But I do believe that Congress has a significant role in foreign policy and should weigh in on this. There will be a vote within 60 days, and I looked over the agreement yesterday, and my conclusion is that it has too many unknowns, leaves too much nuclear capacity. I'm concerned about allowing the sale of ballistic missiles to Iran. And so for a number of reasons, I'll end up being a no vote on this agreement.
On the issue of national security, one of the areas where you've led, and you're your own man, but I'll make a comparison, where your father led, and I supported his stand on this, is opposing the warmongering that seems to have taken over the Republican establishment. Why are we still in Afghanistan?
Well, this is a good question. I had dinner with a Navy SEAL a couple of weeks ago in San Diego, and he told me, look, we're good at defeating the enemy. We just don't do a very good job once we plant our flag. And I think there's some truth to that. I think the people who were organizing in Afghanistan, along with bin Laden, were our enemies, and they did attack us, and they deserve to be not only punished, but wiped out so they couldn't attack us again. But the problem creeps up when we're there decade after decade, and we think, we're going to become the civil government and build the schools and roads. We've now spent $100 billion in Afghanistan, much more than was spent on the Marshall Plan, and yet there's not a lot to be seen for it. Many of the schools have been trashed. Once they're built, they're torched, and really a lot of it was stolen through graft by Karzai and his family in the drug trade. So we're just not very good at nation building, and we shouldn't be in the business of nation building. I think we need to have a strong national defense to defend ourselves. When we have to use force, we use it overwhelmingly and for victory and without restraint. But really, we need to think long and hard about a lot of the interventions out there. The Hillary's war in Libya, which was supported by actually several of the other people running for the Republican nomination, really is a disaster. Getting rid of Gaddafi led to chaos and the rise of radical Islam, and now a third of Libya actually pledges allegiance to ISIS. So I'm one who will be saying, look before we leap, and not every intervention has been a good one for America.
I think you have staked out a unique position within the Republican field, and one that the Republican Party should move more toward, and I hope you will continue to lead on that issue. I'm very supportive. Another where I think you have defined your position, and I would like to see Republicans move closer to, is the issue of the individual versus the government and the issue of privacy, which we seem to have forgotten, which is at the core of freedom and liberty. What can we do to stop the NSA spying on innocent American citizens? You're only one senator. You've led on the issue. You've filibustered on the issue. You've kept the issue in the media's attention, in our attention. What can actually be done to stop this?
The first thing you need to know is that President Obama continues to do it. Even though Congress voted to end the bulk collection, he's suing in court to continue doing it. Even though he says, we must balance liberty and security, and I have a great deal of sympathy for liberty, he's not doing any of it. He's continuing to collect all of our records. I'm convinced that we can look at the records and even look more thoroughly at the records of people for whom we have suspicion, people for whom we suspect of being terrorists. But that does not mean we have to look at the records of all Americans all the time. We fought the revolution over this. Our founding fathers actually probably were more motivated by the Fourth Amendment, the right to be left alone, the right to have individualized warrants, than they were the Second Amendment. In fact, I tell people they could have never conceived of a government that would take your guns from them, but they could conceive of the British government who actually was coming into their houses unannounced with warrants with no one's name on it, written by soldiers. And that's what's been allowed to happen under the Patriot Act, is that we have this indiscriminate searching of people for whom there is no suspicion. So I think we can follow the Constitution. In fact, I was having a conversation with a senator during the Patriot Act, not this one, but previously, and he said, well, if it expires at midnight, what will you do? And I said, well, certainly we could just rely on the Constitution for a few hours, couldn't we? And they don't quite get that. We catch murderers and rapists and terrible people every day. The police all obey the Fourth Amendment. Well, they're supposed to. Most every policeman in Houston, if they're going to go in someone's house tonight, even if they think there's a rapist in there, they call a judge on the phone at 2 a.m, and the judge almost always says yes. But we separated the judiciary power from the police power so we would have checks and balances, and so systemic bias wouldn't enter in, so we don't have police going into the homes of Jewish people or evangelical Christians or homeschoolers. We don't want an indiscriminate government. We want a government that has checks and balances so power doesn't get out of control.
Senator Rand Paul is our guest. Senator, let's take Barack Obama out of this for a moment. Let's talk pure process, because there'll be another president after him as there was before him. Do you think that the president of the United States is aware, either himself or through his cabinet, of who exactly is being spied upon and what is being done with that data, particularly as it relates to Supreme Court justices or United States senators?
I think there's a lot of information that's gathered in our Intelligence Committee for which very, very few people know what's going on. The Intelligence Committees in the Senate and the House know more than the regular members. So many of these programs are not known by regular representatives like myself or any other senators. The other interesting thing is even people in the Intelligence Committee, people who do try to defend privacy, like Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, he says that some of these programs he had never heard of and had tried to find out about. And even when we brought the Intelligence Committee, we brought James Clapper, the head of intelligence, to the committee and asked him, are you collecting in bulk the records of Americans? And he said no. This is where the real breakdown is in a constitutional republic, is if you have people who for whom there is no check and balance, for whom there is no oversight. And that's where we are at this point, where I think there could be people and information being gathered that no one has a notion of and no one's revealing. For example, there was an article about a week or two ago saying that the CFPB, this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the Fed, is collecting 95% of all your credit card data. And think about what's in your credit card data. Probably more data and more information in your credit card bill than there actually is on your phone records. You can tell what people buy, what
Sure.
kind of magazines they read. You can tell their religion. You can tell their doctors. You can tell their medicines. This is a great invasion of privacy, and the government should not be allowed to indiscriminately snatch up all these records.
If Senator Rand Paul is President Rand Paul, what would become of Edward Snowden?
I think that's a good question and not an easy one. I think that we have to have rules with regard to security. So we can't have somebody who works for the CIA or the NSA that says, I think I'll list, everybody's name who works in the CIA in Europe or Russia or different places like that. So we do have to have rules, and there has to be punishment. At the same time, those in charge of intelligence have to obey rules too. James Clapper came and perjured himself before the Senate and denied they were doing a program. Edward Snowden then revealed the program. So I think what he was doing was a civil protest, and it was a whistleblower, but he's not covered by the whistleblower statute. So one thing I've tried to put forward is the idea that contractors for government should also be allowed to inform of illegal behavior. From his point of view, he said he had nobody to complain to because there was nothing that would protect him. And I think that's true because as a contractor. So some of the rules we could change, but ultimately I think there would have to be some form of punishment if he came home. But I've been one saying to people, and some of this I've said flippantly, I said maybe he and James Clapper could share the same cell and talk about liberty and security together. But, in all seriousness, I think there would have to be some form of punishment, but it wouldn't be beheading, shooting at dawn, or execution, which a lot of crazy people have said we ought to do to him.
Senator Rand Paul is our guest. You proposed a flat and fair tax plan, which I thought was solid, transparent, easy to administer, easy to follow for law-abiding citizens. You have proposed a sanctuary city bill that I think is quite reasonable. You've asked the question of Debbie Wasserman Schultz whether it's okay to abort a full-term baby and sell the organs. It seems like you're making the right proposals and asking the right questions and doing the right things, but in a crowded field of a lot of guys and some bold personalities, it doesn't seem you're getting the attention you otherwise would. Do you think you're getting fair media coverage?
Actually, for the most part, I think we have been treated fairly. I think we've been on Fox News as much as anybody else has been. It's just hard when they're a 15-person race to get 20 or 30% of the vote, But we've scored at the top of national polls. We've scored in the top tier of national polls. We've been first in some of the early state primary polls, and we've been second and third. But we've been consistently in the pack. There's no question that we'll be included in the debates. And frankly, there'll be many governors and some U.S. senators who will not be in the debates. So actually, we think we're doing pretty well. And a lot will depend on debate performance. And nobody can predict how well they'll do. But I can predict that whoever does well in the debates and whoever is able to stand their ground and present their positions intelligently, I think will go far, and you will see people's numbers change based on their debate performances.
Senator Rand Paul, thanks for spending time with us. I hope on the issue of privacy for the individual, you will continue to squawk on your soapbox as loudly as you can, because I support you 100% in that issue, and I think you have really led